Even a worm can have dangerous friends. So this happened back in high school, involving one very dear friend and his manic sociopath of a buddy. Let me outline the cast of this beautiful production. First, there was our victim, who was possibly just the nicest dude I have ever encountered in my life. I'll call him ND. His home life was pretty good. While it was just him and his mother was incredibly busy working a very high-paying job to give him a comfortable life, and as such, she wasn't home often. So, to make up for that and to assure her son was living comfortably, she provided him with an insane weekly allowance, like $500 insane. And so, of course, being a teenager with more expendable income than he knew what to do with, he constantly blew it on weed, electronics, and nice clothes. Despite his comfortable living situation, he was by and large just a great dude. Always spent money on his friends, shared his weed, had movie nights. Honestly, I think he just felt a little lonely and wanted to share what he had with people he cared about. Then we have the agent of chaos in this story. We will call this absolute fucking maverick Horse, due to an equally illogical high school nickname that he demanded everyone call him. Horse and I were buddies, mainly due to equal parts self-preservation and edgy teenage nihilism that simply wanted to release his special brand of unhinged out into the world. He was the friend you made because it was not a matter of if he got sent to jail, but when, and you really rather not have your name be a part of that headline. This wasn't to say that Horse was a bad dude. Talking to him was pretty chill for the most part, and I genuinely enjoyed our time together. But you got the vibe that there was this underlying problem going untreated. A nice enough dude if you were friends, didn't even really ever argue with people, but if you wronged him then might as well skip the country and change your name. Horse didn't deal in an eye for an eye. He wanted your teeth, eyes, and maybe a few fingers while he was at it. Horse also bought a wild animal off of someone at school. This is unrelated to the story at hand, but I feel it paints the picture of just the kind of impulsive teenage boy who purchases a wild animal that another teenager clearly just found somewhere outside and brought into the school, all without having a single clue of how to care for it. I'm going to leave what type of animal unspecified, as it was the same as his nickname, but will say that it was a dog-sized herbivore that lived uncaged on his bedroom floor for several years. So, into the story. ND came to school one day, looking like he just got dragged behind a car for a few blocks. We're talking busted blood vessels in his eye, scrapes and cuts, as well as several swollen bits on his face. He was, and still is I suppose, a very dark-skinned guy. So just how bruised he was I can't tell you, but I was going to hazard the guess, super. Normal friend reactions, including my own, were immediate concern, asking if he needed to go to the hospital, if he was all right, and what happened. Turns out he had invited a few guys over to his place the night before to smoke weed, bought and paid for by him, and play video games. Upon seeing ND's apartment and all his fancy toys, they decided to repay his kindness by beating the ever-loving crap out of him and horking his stuff. Rational friends told him to file a police report, to which he waved them off, not wanting to cause more issues, not to mention they had been smoking. Less rational friends suggested he get a strap, which he also declined. Then comes the least rational person in our entourage. Horse had not been present during ND's explanation of the night before. Being a chaotic nexus of violent urges shaped like a teenage boy, he needed his sleep, and a lot of it, so he never arrived at school less than an hour late. So he stumbles in as we're moving to a new class, takes one look at ND, and asks a single question. Who did it? ND, being a nice guy who hadn't even wanted police intervention, sure as hell wouldn't sick Horse on these idiots, so he made up some lie about having a concussion and not remembering. Horse doesn't buy it, and spends the rest of his day up ND's ass, demanding to know the exact names of everyone involved. ND eventually buckles, reluctantly naming each of the poor idiots who would likely eventually wish that he had gone to the cops instead. Of course, first came violent retribution, Horse's favorite kind. Being an absolutely huge dude, with no regard for his own safety and well-being, and less regard for others, he was a pretty intimidating guy. He spent the rest of the day skipping out on his classes, hunting down each of the guys involved, and beating them until my hands felt wet. His own words. Security stepped in once or twice, handling him with the same bored exasperation they faced all of our school's problems with. We went to a painfully underfunded school with lots of gang/drug/alcohol/pregnancy problems, and so the security swiftly stopped caring about their jobs. And if you couldn't guess, Horse was a bit of a problem student. Horse's real name, what do you think you're doing? They stole from my friend. Security just gave a deep, exasperated sigh, clearly understanding that they can do nothing about a clear violation of the law of the land, and that the slight Horse had faced demanded swift and extrajudicial retaliation. But also, they did sort of get paid to make sure that these idiot kids didn't Lord of the Flies themselves out of the gene pool all the time, so some sort of compromise needed to be made for the sake of keeping their jobs. Security just gave a deep, exasperated sigh, clearly understanding that they can do nothing about a clear violation of the law of the land, and that the slight Horse had faced demanded swift and extrajudicial retaliation. But also, they did sort of get paid to make sure that these idiot kids didn't Lord of the Flies themselves out of the gene pool all the time, so some sort of compromise needed to be made for the sake of keeping their jobs. Just don't send him to the hospital, okay? It was a gentleman's agreement, to which Horse obliged. Maybe out of respect for the security guard who dealt with his shit, or maybe because his knuckles were bleeding and that kinda sucked. Either way, there was a world of options for making their lives a living hell, and Horse intended to explore as many as he could, at least until they broke and took his ultimatum. Give my friend his stuff back or I won't stop. But they had all weathered a beating. They were high on teenage hubris, and also probably weed. What was the worst he could do? But they had all weathered a beating? They were high on teenage hubris, and also probably weed. What was the worst he could do? Which is an incredibly stupid question to ask about a guy who once begged me to touch the bone poking out of his broken arm. I was crying more than he was. He proceeded to make the next few weeks hell. There was, of course, the petty things. Knocked their lunch out of their hands, swiped homework, locked one of them in the boiler room. Pretty much if you can imagine a bully from an 80s movie doing it. Short of vehicular homicide? What the fuck, Goonies? He did it. Then came the heavier stuff. Brought in his dad's bolt cutters in. Like I said, security was hot garbage in this school. Also only ever watched the front doors, leaving back and side doors free to sneak in and out of. And snapped the locks off of 2 of their lockers, as one of them used a master lock, then proceeded to clear out their stuff. Textbooks, an iPod, which I now own, gym clothes, anything he could get his hands on would be swiped. The valuables would be kept, but things he didn't care about were usually ripped up and left in the hall to be discovered later along with the broken lock. Their cars were his favorite target by far. He stole their hubcaps, slashed their tires, left deep scratches along the side of their cars. One had a dick scratched into their passenger door. At one point, he borrowed my tire iron to straight up remove one of their car tires and roll it off into the nearby park, where he ditched it in a patch of dry, fenced-off scrub that had yet to be burned back, which would be a real fun discovery for the park department, I'm sure. He had entertained the idea of getting a skunk into one of their cars, but gave up when he realized we lived in a city and he had no idea of where to get or how to transport a skunk. Backpacks were snatched as well, mostly dumped in the ladies' locker room showers with the water on, though he did light one on fire if memory serves. Textbooks were free unless you ruined them, and then you had to pay out of pocket, and our school was very generous with what ruined meant. Covers fell off? Fine. All the pages are drawn on? Whatever. But if the whole book was destroyed, well, they couldn't do anything for you, and had to order a new one on your dime. He tried to tell a teacher that one of them had cheated off him, but given his scholastic history, that was quickly tossed out as dumb and sit back down, Horse's real name. The final nail in the coffin was ruining a senior's relationship with the girl he'd been dating since freshman year. So Horse had quite a few lady friends on account of being a very large, intimidating guy who would take any excuse, like perhaps a pretty girl complaining about a creep, to start a fight. Needless to say, they were keen on helping him out. One girl I'll call Praying Mantis decided to help in his crusade. Managed to fineness Dick picks out of our hapless senior. Of course he had a girlfriend, but he was also a very horny teenager, and PM was a very pretty girl. Sweet-talked him all the way out of his pants, and then proceeded to send every photo to his girlfriend and spin a tale about how she had been blowing him for 6 months now, how she hadn't known that he had a girlfriend, and she felt so bad. Of course, teenage girls are kinda dumb, and PM got called a slut and a bitch, and all sorts of other names. But come the next day, we still find the cheating senior's ass very much dumped. After about a month or so of non-stop abuse, Horse never really felt an obligation to go to class, so he could spend all his free time on revenge if need be. Teachers just passed him with D's to get him out of their classes. He reminded them of his ultimatum. That evening, lo and behold, North Dakota got a knock on his door, and his muggers were back, this time with most of his things in tow. They didn't return everything. I believe a few games and a Blu-ray player were not returned, but ND lied and told Horse he got everything back for the sake of ending his rampage. I do want to say that Horse faced some sort of punishment for his many crimes. However, over his career as my friend, he had informed me of so many suspensions, detentions, and extra work that he never planned to do, that it all sort of blended together after a while, and I can't tell you how long he was out of school. But I can say that he was a junior both my junior and senior years.